Shalom everyone. In the past few weeks, I've been getting some emails and text messages asking lots of questions about the peace treaty that Israel just had with the United Emirates, which located, of course, in the Gulf. In the next few minutes, and it's only going to be a few minutes, we're going to try to sum the subject of that peace, who gained, who lost, and why. Who are the players? The United Emirates is probably the Arab country which is the most similar to the United States. It is made out of 7 emirates. I can read the name of them. Dubai, which is the largest one, Abu Dhabi, Sharjah, Ajman, Ras Al Khaimah, Fujairah, and Al Quwain. The Emirates are totally independent. They run their own life domestically. The central government does not really get involved in all the aspects of the domestic life in the Emirates itself. Some of them are more conservative than others. Everybody is dreaming now of going to visit the place, and some of them you'll have to behave like you're behaving in a very conservative Muslim country, unlike Dubai and Abu Dhabi, which are a bit more liberals than others. The head of the country is a man by the name of Mohammed bin Zayed. Since 2004, he inherited from his father. The job, or the job description of the president, is to run the security and the foreign affair of the United Emirates. Where is it located? And that's maybe very interesting, and the key to the understanding of everything is in this map, or the map that you can see behind me on the wall. This triangle over here is divided between the Emirates on one side and Oman on the other. Both, by the way, have relationship with Israel since the 90s, 94, 95, 96, under the government of the late Yitzhak Rabin, and then Shimon Peres, and of course Benjamin Netanyahu. I think it was 2 years ago that Netanyahu visited Oman and met with the Sultan Qaboos, who was then the leader of Oman. Notice that right opposite the triangle, right over here, this is Iran. And in this corner over here is a place called Bandar el Abbas, probably the most important Persian or Iranian port that exports oil out of the Gulf. This is the Gulf. The top of the Gulf over here is Iraq and Kuwait. About 35%, maybe some people say a bit more, of the world oil coming out of this Gulf. And I believe, and of course this is my personal opinion and not necessarily an absolute knowledge, that the Iranian attempt to get the nuclear capability is not so much to destroy Israel. This is a bonus from their point of view, but rather to take control over the entire Gulf. And once you take control of the entire Gulf, you can control the world prices of oil, makes Iran not only a rich country, but an extremely, extremely powerful one that cannot be threatened or defeated by any other nations around them or even from far. This is one player, of course, the United Emirates and Iran. But the peace accord with them, you know, like every business, there are people who gain and people who lose. The people who gain more than anybody else, the people who lose more than anybody else, in my opinion, of course, are the Palestinians. The Palestinians that since 1994, during the Oslo Accord, Yasser Arafat was very much afraid to stay alone facing Israel. Personally, I think he did not even want to have a peace accord with Israel, but let's leave that aside. Decided to convince the Arab League, the league of all the Arab nations in the Middle East, most of them are Sunni nations, to have an agreement that no one will sign any agreement with Israel unless the Palestinian problem is being solved. In other words, he had a veto on relationship of any other country with Israel. The Palestinian in this peace accord lost that veto. That veto was extremely important to them. It was their best card, their ace. They lost it during the peace accord now. No wonder they're very, very upset about it. But what they gained? Not much. Israel stopped the attempt of annexation of some parts of the West Bank, as Prime Minister Netanyahu announced a few months ago. Probably that thing would never worked anyways. There was no public support in Israel or international support to such move, and I'm not sure it would have happened, but nevertheless, Israel have declared now part of the agreement that there will be no annexation. Another part of the agreement, which is probably hidden, but we see it on the ground, Israel stopped building in the West Bank. There's about 4,000 apartment units or houses that Israel was about to build in the West Bank in the next few months to a year and a half. And at the moment, there is a total freeze. I think the government of Israel will not admit it, but on the ground itself, you can see the results of it. And of course, the settlers in the West Bank are not, Jewish settlers, of course, are not very happy about it. And already we can see some dismay. At the moment, it's articles in the newspapers, some political statements in the Knesset, which is the parliament of the State of Israel. But as time goes and the freeze will be maintained, I believe that we'll see more repercussions against the Prime Minister at the moment. So this is what the Palestinians lost, or if you want, gain. Jordan and Egypt, the two countries that already have peace with Israel, they're also part of the game. Jordan, constitutional monarchy that has 70% Palestinian citizens living in there, you do not hear a squeak from there. Almost not in the newspaper, almost not in the public arena. You don't hear much resistance against the deal. I do believe that one of the main reasons you don't have that is that Jordan is part of the package. The rumors in here is that Jordan will get 2 squadrons of F-16, dire need for that in order to combat some of the northern problem of the border with Syria. Jordan right now have between 600 and 700,000 refugees that came from Syria, which is a huge burden on their economy. They'll get a nice financial package either from Saudi Arabia or from the Emirates, maybe from Bahrain as well. I don't know. And Jordan is quite satisfied with that kind of a deal. The next player, of course, is Egypt. Egypt's biggest problem right now is, of course, the Muslim Brotherhood. President al-Sisi is very much afraid that a coup will start from the bottom, mostly because of economical pressure that Egypt is suffering. He feels that he needs extremely advanced weapon, which is promised to him, not only the famous submarine that Germany sold to Egypt, probably with the consent of Israel, but more advanced weapon from the United States. I believe that squadron of F-35 or maybe F-16 will be provided to Egypt in the future, and Egypt will regain its position as one of the major leaders of the Arab world. They were the leaders many years ago, and Sisi would like very much to regain it again. So he played as a sort of a best man in the wedding between the system. The Emirates. The Emirates is a very interesting story. I think the Emirates are looking far into the future. They're not looking at the short-term issue. They have 2 problems. Problem number 1, which is not a problem for all of us in the West, and that's the environment. They feel that the world is going in one direction: preserve and save the environment. So an oil-based economy is no longer going to be a politically correct type of an economy. Since 2004, their leader, Mohammed bin Zayed, decided to move the economy of the Emirates from being an oil-based economy to a high-tech, tourism, international business, sort of a Hong Kong of the Middle East. And he's very, very successful. In this aspect, needless to say that Israel can contribute a lot to the economy of the Emirates. Israel can provide technology. Israel can provide huge know-how in agriculture, not to mention tourism that brings a huge amount of money to the Emirates. So the oil-based economy is no longer valid in nowadays. It's probably not going to happen now, but I believe in 25 years from now, maybe 50 years from now, oil-based economy will no longer be an in thing to be. The second problem that they have, if you noticed, the Gulf area, this is Oman. This is the Hormuz Strait. Right across is Iran. Iran, it's trying very hard to not conquer the Middle East, but to create a Caesar-like hug of the Sunni nations. They're very successful. They've managed to penetrate via Yemen in the south part of Saudi Arabia, convincing tribes. They use proxies. They use a tribe called the Houthis to really harass and bother very much the Saudis from the south. In the north, they have penetrated via Iraq, the Shiite population, into Syria, into their major proxy that goes all the way to the Mediterranean, and that is the Hezbollah in Lebanon. And by that, they create an unbelievable risk to the Emirates. Not only to the Emirates, by the way, to most of the small countries over in the Gulf. Those Sunnis countries are looking around. By the way, Saudis is part of it. They're looking around and they see who is the only country in the past 10 years that was willing to stand against the Iranian. Not the Americans, not the Russian, not Turkey, which is a Sunni country also. It's Israel. Israel is the only country that constantly harassing the Iranian politically, international arenas such as the UN. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is running around all over the world claiming Iran is lying. We even managed to steal the entire database of the Iranian nuclear program and deliver it not only to America but to every security organizations in the world, in Europe and other countries as well. According to foreign sources, and I don't know if it's true or not, almost on a nightly basis, Israel destroy from the air bases of Iran in Syria, and Iran does not retaliate. I don't know why they don't retaliate. I think at the moment they're waiting to see what will fall in America in the next election, who will get in, and how that person, whether it will be President Donald Trump or President Joe Biden, treat the Iranian and restrain Israel. Again, this is something that I cannot foresee into the future. But when the Gulf country sees that, they say we better side with those guys who basically are protecting us. They're not protecting us directly, but they're protecting us. Because if Iran will start a large move of Caesar-like around the Sunni country, that will create a threat to Israel, and Israel will react. So why not to create a relationship which are also based not only on economy, but also on security? Maybe, who knows, Israel will even be allowed to have a base right here at this point, which is a stone throw away from Iran. I'm sure the Iranian will not like that, but it's definitely a solution. So the Emirates sees those two issues and they decide this is probably way more important than anything else. The last player, with the exceptions of the United States, which I'll get to it in a second, is Israel. Needless to say, Israel is signing a peace with another Arab country. And by the way, as of this morning, we heard that there is another country by the name of Bahrain. Bahrain, located just north of Qatar. It's an archipelago of 33 small islands, mostly deserted, but rich with oil. And it looks like they're going to sign, the second country in that area, they will sign a peace treaty with Israel, some kind of an agreement with Israel. Maybe others will come, Sudan in Africa, and everybody's hoping that Saudi Arabia will join. By the way, as of last week, Saudi Arabia announced they will allow Israeli flagged airplanes such as El Al or Israel to fly over its territory on the way to the Gulf. That will shorten the flight from Israel to Dubai or Abu Dhabi to 3.5 hours instead of 9 hours before. We used to fly north via Turkey and so on. So it was really a nuisance. So that's of course is great, and we really hope that the Saudis will join. Israel gain. I mean, there's no doubt that Prime Minister Netanyahu saw an opportunity and seized it. Of course, I mean, who wouldn't? What Israel lost something very important. Personally, I think it's important, but it's not crucial. And that is the veto that Israel had, official veto, against selling advanced weapon to Arab countries. By the way, the veto was grounded and the veto was decided by the American Congress in 2004 that the United States of America will always maintain a qualitative edge of Israel over its other countries. Therefore, the F-35, for example, Israel have, I think, 2 squadrons, never was sold to any countries but Israel. And now the United States will sell it to the Emirates, maybe to the Saudis, and maybe even to the Egyptian. A lot of security people within the country are very much against it. They feel that countries like Saudi can turn against Israel, just like the Turks used to be their best allies, and the Iranian up until 1977 used to be their best allies, and now they're not. But even if they'll pay cash, and they'll pay right now, right at this minute, they'll pay the manufacturer to give them as many planes as they can afford, it will take 8 years before that will happen. And who knows what will happen in 10 years. Either a complete peace of the Middle East, we hope, or, of course, something else. I believe that there will be a real peace, at least with those countries which do not have really a border with Israel and have no real conflict with Israel. So that will give us time to establish relationship that will lead into the future. So that Israel lost the veto to that. By the way, that congressional resolution was reaffirmed in 2014. I think it was May of 2014 by Congressman Brad Schneider of Illinois. So Israel lost that. In addition, Israel lost its decision to annex, what we spoke about before regarding the Palestinians, as well as freeze of building in Jewish settlement in the West Bank. The biggest winner is the United States of America. The United States of America, as of, 14, 15 years ago, decided not to have any more boots on the ground in many of the conflicts of the world. The history of Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, Syria, and on is no longer accepted in the American publics. Republicans or Democrats, it doesn't really matter. And as a result of that, America needs to be the economical power. This deal, do you know how much an F-15 cost? It is approximately $100 million per unit. A squadron is 25 units. 2 squadron is 50 units. That's only to the Emirates. Who knows what was promised to Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Jordan, which means the United States gets an injection of billions of dollars into its economy. Huge amount of working force will be working only for that, and America will cut out as the deal breaker of the Middle East, and it will enhance its position over the Russian or the Turks, and definitely over Iran. This is less than 20 minutes of the deal with the Emirates. Let's pray and hope they will work out. Shalom.